look at the, yeah. Hi, my name is Liam. I'm 31 years old, and I just celebrated 90 days clean.
At what age did you realize that you were gay?
Yeah, I think there's realizing you're gay, and then there's realizing you're different from everybody else, right? And I think I realized that I was different when I was like 5 or 6, and I had a crush on the boys in class instead of the girls, but I didn't know what that meant, right? So I always say that I realized I was gay the first time I heard the word gay and knew what that meant. And I was about 10 or 11 years old, somewhere in there, like 5th grade.
Okay. When is the first time you realized you weren't physically attracted to women?
That, you know, the first time I realized I wasn't physically attracted to women was when I was physically attracted to anyone, right? And that's like right when puberty hits, like for me, that was like 5th grade, 10, 11 years old. And the first like time I was ever interested in someone physically, it was a guy. It wasn't the girls in class that caught my eye or got my attention or did the little heart fluttering thing. It was like my male friends.
Who was the first person or friend that you told you were gay?
The first person I told was my sister. Definitely my sister. And I was like 12 or 13. I remember we were standing in the freezing cold in upstate New York winter waiting for the bus to come, and I just like blurted it out, like let her know. And there was no reaction. There was just silence, you know? I think she already knew, that kind of thing.
I was gonna say she already knew.
She already knew.
What was your experience like telling your first friend?
Yeah, that was in, it was 8th grade. Remember, back in the day, you used to go to the mall on the weekends to hang out. So I remember we were walking through the mall, and we had just seen a movie about, you know, some rom-com or something stupid like that. And I was like, guys, you know how everybody at school always asks me if I'm gay? I think I'm gonna start telling them yes. And they both kind of stopped walking and like turned and looked at me. It was 2 girls, of course. I was a gay boy with girl best friends. And one of them was like, okay. And the other was like, didn't say anything, you know? And that was kind of my first experience coming out to friends, was that one of my best friends was totally okay with it, and one of them was not so much.
What was the most devastating experience you had as far as like bullying or negative energy towards you being gay?
Man, that's a tough one. I wasn't bullied much in middle school when I came out. I was almost bullied more before I came out, right? Because everybody asked the question. They said, "Are you gay?" Or "Liam, you're gay. You're gay. You're gay," right? And that's like hard to hear every day, all day, especially when you kind of know already. Because I'd known for a couple years at that point, and I was just. It made it unsafe to tell them, yeah, I am. What are you gonna do about it, right? Which is eventually what I did to come out, but.
When did you start drinking?
18, definitely. Summer after senior year. I made it all the way through high school without drinking. I was actually the head of a club, like, not Students Against Drunk Driving, but like something like that. You know, we had our own version in my high school, and it was about preventing teen drug and alcohol use. And so I made it all the way through high school without ever trying. And of course, I had the example of my father, who was a raging alcoholic, to keep me away from all that. But summer after high school, I had my first drink. It was like graduation party. You know, somebody had some beer and some vodka, and I had like, I don't even want to call it beer. I had like 3 Bud Lights and a couple shots of Svedka. And that was, you know, until I got sober, that was one of the best days of my life.
How did your alcoholic father handle hearing the news that you were gay?
Yeah, this was one of the more disappointing reactions, was when my father found out I was gay. Because all he had to say was, I always knew, which on its own would be fine. But what he had to say after that was like, you know, I could tell you weren't like the other boys. You didn't like sports. You would always let your sister dress you up, which has nothing to do with being gay. Every little brother with an older sister gets put in a dress. That happens to everybody, right? And maybe not, but I think it happens to everybody, you know? And so, you know, he's like, I could always tell you were gay because, you know, you let your sister put you in a dress and put you in makeup, and, you know, I just could tell from an early age that my son wasn't going to be straight. And it's not like he said, I'm disappointed in you, but the way he said all that, it was clear that he was a little bit disappointed, which, you know, that really hurt because, like, at that point in my life, I'm like, who the fuck are you? Like, I don't even have a solid relationship with you. It's not like you raised me. And for you to be disappointed in how I turned out when you had nothing to do with that. And, you know, if anything, I got your genes, man, so.
So he had the opportunity to be a father at that point, and he had the opportunity to make you feel and realize that everything's going to be okay, and he's proud of you.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, you know, my father had that reaction where it was like, you know, kind of sad disappointment, but nothing too crazy. And my mom had the reaction of, well, you know, honey, every gay guy I've ever known he died of AIDS and became a drug addict. And I was like, damn it. Now as an adult and a drug addict, I'm like, great. I totally didn't like break the stereotype in my mom's eyes, but you know, I haven't. That was tough to hear too, right? Because you worry that those things. It's not that they don't have anything to do with each other, but it's not that I was guaranteed because I'm gay to become anything like that, you know? So that was just, they both had their own preconceived notions of what it means to be gay, and they were from an earlier time. And I think we've come a long way since then in understanding that everybody who's gay is different, and you know, there are a million different kinds of people who do different things, right?
What role did alcohol and drugs play in your life?
Yeah, I think, you know, okay, so I could talk about specifically to the gay thing, or
your life.
Yeah,
life
just in general.
That, you know,
Yeah. So I think growing up, I always had not just, you know. Let me repeat that. So I think growing up, I always had this sense of being different from everybody else and being unable to kind of live life normally, right? Like, I'm the type of person who always stuffed my emotions down. And that's because my mom was never around. She was always working. My dad wasn't in the picture. My sister acted out. My dad was a problem. My stepdad was a problem. So I was the only one who always had to be okay, right? And then for the first time, you know, in my life, suddenly I could be myself. That's what alcohol and drugs did for me, is it gave me access to my emotions and to being myself, right? And I think, you know, as much as I like to say that being gay and being a drug addict have nothing to do with each other, they, you know, being gay is a part of my story. It's a part of my drug and alcohol story too. Growing up, I was the only gay person I knew. I grew up in a tiny town in upstate New York, and it was difficult to be that person, right? To be the only out person who's gay, to deal with everybody's expectations and everybody asking questions about it. And, you know, that was another part of myself that I had to stuff down. So when I drank and when I did drugs, I had all of this like locked up stuff inside of me. And when I was 18 and finally like let that free, it was a big moment for me. I felt liberated for the first time. And that's not just because of my parents, but also because, you know, I grew up gay in a small town in the 90s.
I get it.
Yeah.
What was the last 3 days of your active addiction like before you decided to go into treatment? Where you're at now?
The last 3 days of my active addiction were hell on earth. I was shot out. Like I had been on a 2-week run, I want to say. I'd slept maybe one day in the past like 10, just doing mountains of cocaine and drinking tons of alcohol. I was on the verge of divorce. Like, we had sort of officially separated in my, like, while high. I had like separated from my husband and like was living in our other apartment and like wasn't seeing my son and was holed up in this like horrible little hellhole, like by myself, doing drugs and buying drugs and stealing money from my husband to go buy more drugs. And on the last day of my addiction, I ended up, I was in Times Square and I got freaked out. I walked into a McDonald's and there was a cop there, and I was paying for my order, and I suddenly became convinced the cop knew there was cocaine on my credit card. I don't know if they actually knew or didn't know, but I freaked out. I ran out of that frickin' McDonald's like a bat out of hell and start running through Times Square, being chased by cops and undercover agents and God knows what else. It was absolutely psychotic, right? It's a funny story, but it's not. It's a story of like cocaine-induced psychosis. And I end up, being actually chased by the police and paramedics, and luckily the paramedics got to me first and took me to a hospital, and I woke up in, restrained in a hospital. Absolutely terrified, out of my mind, right? Like giving a false name because I think the cops are after me. And, my husband has no idea where I am. And he ends up finding me using Find My iPhone, and he shows up at the hospital. I'm like, how did they call you? I gave them a fake name. And he's like, you weren't home, and I thought you were dead. So that was the last 3 days of my addiction. I went to rehab that day out of the hospital. And, I spent 45 days setting up the last 90, right? And what that really involved was figuring out, how am I going to do a real program out of this? Like, the last time I went to rehab and I came out, I didn't do anything for myself. I went right back to the same environment. So this time I knew I needed to do something different. And what I decided was that I needed to do 12-step recovery. And so I got out of rehab. I moved into a sober house, Rise Recovery. And, that was the right move because it gave me a community, it gave me a safe place to land. It wasn't the same environment. And it gave me the opportunity that I needed to stay in treatment, stay in an intensive outpatient, and go to meetings, get a sponsor, start working the steps. And that's what I've spent all my time here in New Jersey doing, right? I've found a sponsor, I found a home group, I do service, I speak at meetings. Like, the first 45 days of my 90 in recovery were spent in rehab, and the second 45 days were spent like putting everything I learned in rehab into practice in the real world.
Did you know that LGBT people are twice as likely to become drug addicts?
I'm not super surprised to hear that. I didn't know the exact number, but I think that, the world is a lot better place than it used to be for gay people in society, but growing up, there's homophobia, there's bullying, there's all this stuff that happens to people, lost job opportunities, housing discrimination, and that never happened to me. And I always kind of sort of thought I got away with it. But at the end of the day, I'm a drug addict, and I didn't escape unscathed.
How did recovery play a role in you accepting the fact that A, you're a drug addict or alcoholic, and B, that you're gay? And it doesn't even have to be that recovery had anything to do with that.
Right,
you might have been okay
right.
with that a long time ago.
Yeah.
I don't know. I really don't know.
Yeah, that's a good answer. I'll be honest, I always thought that I'd accepted being gay a really long time ago and that it didn't affect me anymore. But what I realized in recovery is that there's still a lot of shame and guilt around being gay and what that meant for me and what that looked like growing up. There's a lot more shame and guilt around that than I thought there was. And recovery has given me a chance to look at my past demons and, you know, accept them about myself, accept different aspects of who I am as a person, including being gay, and make that more of like an integrated whole part of me, right? I am a whole person. I am many things, including being gay. And recovery is helping me accept who I am as a person in general. And that's made it a lot easier to not drink and not use drugs. Getting over shame and guilt is the first thing you have to do if you want to stop being a drug addict.